Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me on another of my wonderful interviews. Now, I might be a little bit out of my depth in this one because we're going to be talking about birth. Now, I'm not talking about the birth certificate. We all know about the legal fiction and all of that sort of stuff in this show. But we're talking about before that happens. You know, there's 9 months of something going on in a woman's womb, and then new life leaps forward into the world. But these days, it's all being sorted out by the system, isn't it? I don't know if you've gone through that yourself or you've been the partner of somebody going through that and thought, hang on, this didn't go really very well. We wanted one thing and we've had something else. My own experience with my then wife at the time, 33 years ago, was that the first child was born in a hospital, and it wasn't quite what we imagined it was. We were hoping to have home births, and the second and the third time were actually born here in my little terraced house. And in fact, the studio that I operate from is actually the master bedroom, in which one of my children, and I do forget which one it was, I think it was my daughter, was born pretty much where I'm sitting now, some 20, well, she's 30, so there we go, 30 years ago. Absolutely amazing, which has made the house extremely special for me. But it's not for everybody. I appreciate that, because the system does seem to frighten us about taking that independent role. So I'm going to talk to a lovely lady who is very much strident and talks about home birth and more natural, holistic birth. She runs a website called whenpushcomestosshove.co.uk, which you've got to admit is a fantastic name for giving birth. Her name is I've done it again. Nickita. Thank you very much. I can't read my own writing. She is a traditional birth attendant and birth keeper. I want to find out what that is and whether the system these days is far better. I don't think it will be, than it was perhaps 100 or 200 years ago. Nickita, thank you so much for joining me. Sorry about mispronouncing your name
Oh,
there.
that's okay. Thank you for having me on, Richard.
It's lovely to have you on. We did do part of the recording, and then I realised I hadn't pressed the button, and I'm, sorry about that. So we started all over again. Nickita, we were talking when we first started. What is a birth attendant and birth keeper, and how does that differ from midwifery?
So, I'm a holistic birth practitioner, which means I don't provide any clinical care, purely on the basis that birth is a natural process that will very rarely need medical intervention, not the other way around. I did start off in midwifery, but I found the system to be like a conveyor belt, and it wasn't women centered, it was system centered. I found that, well, midwife is meant to mean with women, but what I found it to mean is with system. It didn't align with me, and I went down a different pathway. And there wasn't really a word for what I did back then. Maybe doula, but I don't know. It's a little bit more than that. So I teach holistic care during pregnancy and birth. I train people to do what I do. I understand when it comes to preventative measures of pregnancy ailments. So understanding nutrition, the mind body soul connection, and what causes disease within the body. I'm not dogmatic that it should be home birth. My message is choice, and
Right.
when push comes to shove is a platform to either help you navigate the system, birth inside it, or leave it altogether. But the point is, most women that I come across have no idea they have a choice, and more to the point, they are very fearful of their own bodies. We have been separated from our authenticity over the years, and we kind of hand over our bodies to the system, and unfortunately it results in a hell of a lot of trauma. Just those of you watching, just speak to the people around you about their recent births. Is it empowered or is it traumatic? Unfortunately, it's usually traumatic, which is why I do what I do now. My first birth was 15 years ago. It was horrific, and I spoke to my grandmother, who had had 7 children, and I asked her, how did you do this so many times when trauma is so normal? And she said, it's not normal, it's common. There's a difference. And that's when I started getting obsessed with birth. And
So
here
that's an interesting thing. She said it's not normal, it's common.
yeah.
So what does she mean by that?
What I discovered after talking to her, and all the research and all the actual practical work and on the field, it means that the system works perfectly well for the system, just not women, not the women using it. It's a conveyor belt. It's not women-centered. It operates from a level of fear of litigation, fear of things going wrong, and unfortunately that feeds into our subconscious. And I mean, look how we learn about birth, either Hollywood rubbish, watching things on the telly. It's all scenes of drama and horror, when that is not anywhere near the truth of a normal physiological birth. I don't see women screaming for their lives. I see them roar their baby out, but I don't see them begging for pain relief. Some women have orgasms when they give birth.
Blimey.
It's a beautiful natural process that will very, very occasionally need medical intervention. But because we are giving birth in places that are not conducive to a physiological birth, there's this domino effect that starts to happen. Just to give you some perspective on why birth goes wrong, just on one level. When we are giving birth, we have to release a hormone called oxytocin, and that's a love hormone. It's a very shy hormone too. And I can make a comparison of making love and having a baby. So when you have sex, you release oxytocin. But imagine you are having the most beautiful embrace with your partner. You've got this lovely dimly lit room, music playing. You're looking into each other's eyes. And then some prick opens the door and turns the lights on and starts shining a light in your eye and going, oh, I'm just going to put you on this monitor. You might be able to orgasm, but probably not. And I'm going to just put you on the clock and watch you. Do you think you'd be able to get back into that moment?
Probably not. So I don't think. I mean, it does sound like a film set version where if you're primed that that's what's going to happen, that's one thing. But if you're not primed and you're in the middle of your shenanigans in bed, then it's as you say, it's a very, very private affair.
It is.
And giving birth should be. Now, I spoke to one of the events where I was talking, and the lady came up to me and said she was a midwife, and I was just sort of having conversations about how it was with my kids, and she said, oh no, these days we prefer to cut. And she had what a great term for it,
episiotomy.
Yeah, but I mean a sort of cut and pull out rather than a push and whatever you would call it. Having never actually given birth myself, I was there 3 times, and it was a beautiful and a magical experience, and it was wonderful to be helpful rather than just be the man in the way down the corridor, get out the way, because we're dealing with, in a hospital environment in which people normally are there because there's something wrong with them. And clearly, when you're giving birth, it's not that there's something wrong with you. You're doing an amazing, beautiful thing. But she said that the tendency now is they want to just do cesareans rather than encourage a full birth.
Yes, that does seem the common trend. And it's all based on fear. No matter what the variable is, it's a fear variable. But what happens is when women can say, oh, I actually had to have a C-section because I had a big baby, or I had to be induced. Women are never presented with their choices, and you're only as informed as the information that you have in front of you. And this is what I'm trying to change, that women actually know they have a choice. And even when I look after women that end up with a C-section, which is very, very rare, our C-section rate is minuscule. Even if they end up with a C-section, they feel empowered because they had informed choice the whole way through. So let's take you back to when we were in a more primal state as humans. So imagine you're wandering the tundra and you're about to go into labor and you're releasing all this oxytocin, but then you spot a predator, some big toothy, scary, bitey thing. Your body goes, oh, no, don't give birth now, it's not safe. You're going to get eaten. So you release adrenaline, and adrenaline stops the production of oxytocin. But what are the modern day equivalents to the big, scary, toothy, bitey thing? What stimulates adrenaline? Bright lights, feelings of being observed, strangers putting their hands inside you, hearing other women give birth, beeping machines, and then we hear these awful terms, failure to progress. Of course. So then they start you off on a drip. Like, they will tell you, you're over 40 weeks pregnant, you've got to come in and be induced. Well, they never say, you don't have to, this is a choice, you can decline. Then they say scary things like, if you don't come in to be induced, your chances of stillbirth double. Well, that sounds really scary, but
Yeah.
double of what? Is it 1 in 5 to 2 in 5, or 1 in 500 to 2 in 500? Because they're very different statistics. And women need to have an informed choice. Just to acquiesce to something without asking any questions is going to cause more fear. So they're going for their induction. Now, what tends to happen, by the way, I'm not saying that there is never a need for induction or any medical intervention, because of course, for a very small minority of women, we're very lucky to have it. I'm not poo-pooing the system. They saved my life. I broke my back. So I'm not saying we have to get rid of it. I'm just saying we need to ask more questions. So you go in for your induction, and they use usually something initially called prostin, to try and ripen the cervix to get you to go into labor. 9 times out of 10, they'll bring out the big guns, and this drug is called syntocinon. It's a synthetic form of oxytocin, but it doesn't work like normal oxytocin. It just blasts your uterus over and over again with very strong contractions, and this can overstimulate your uterus. Now, because it's very painful, a lot of mums ask for an epidural, which is it blocks the any feeling you've got in that area.
Yes.
But then it renders you on your back. And giving birth on your back is an awful idea, because you're not using gravity. Your pelvic outlet decreases by 30% laying on your back.
Right.
And they up the Synto drip. And during this time, you're still being overstimulated. And your placenta is now being starved of oxygen because of the hyperstimulation of the contractions. So then baby sometimes goes into distress. Then they have to rush mum in for a C-section or a ventouse or an instrumental delivery extraction from a cascade of intervention that they started.
Yeah.
Just because she's overdue, without providing mums with evidence for this. And I don't think the women and men working in the system are sitting there going, ha ha, I'm going to piss you off. No.
No, but I'm not putting it past certain managers higher up to say we need the output quicker. Yep. We need to do this, and if we can just not give people certain choices, don't give them too much information, because they're stupid. They'll go along and put the fear factor into them. I'm not putting it past anything in these days, when we've seen how most of the population of the world have taken a medical intervention without any thought and have been cajoled into doing it. My ex-wife, when we had the kids, as I say, one was in hospital, which was a nightmare with the clinical walls, the bright lights, no comfort whatsoever, sterile room, and screaming in other areas. Here at home, made very comfortable. She was on all fours.
Yeah, because I would have told her to do that.
Right. Oh, okay. And it was, like ready to catch something at the other end. And she was very quick. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to be like that, but from a husband's point of view, from a male perspective, it was so, you felt you had a role, even if it was making cups of tea, holding, doing the breathing that we did, and just being there, being useful, going when she didn't want you in the room, whatever it was a beautiful thing. And then afterwards, you are at home with your baby. And you haven't got those bleeping things and people coming in every 2 seconds and all of that. So when people are given the choice that you're telling them, what do you say? Say I'm just for the sake of argument, dispel belief beyond the pale here. I'm a woman, close to giving birth. Mm-hmm. What sort of? I mean, you presumably you get involved much earlier on, do you? When do you get it?
It varies. Sometimes I get contacted at the 11th hour, but that's usually from my advocacy helpline. So we have a helpline for women who feel they're being coerced into procedures, or even when the social services have been called because they have been birthing outside of guidelines and things have been misconstrued. So we do help women navigate the system. But usually when they get in touch with me personally or my directory, they want a birth keeper instead. Right. Or You can do what's called a wild pregnancy and free birth. You do not have to legally engage the NHS. It's an optional service, but most women don't know that. In fact, a lot of people that work in the system don't know that because they refer women who are free birthing to social services, thinking it's
Do they?
legal. Oh yeah, it happens all the time. My books are full of women who need help with that. So if a woman gets in touch with me, usually it's not her first baby because she tried that the first time and used
Right.
the first time, and they're like, okay, I need to do this differently. I'm not. That's not to say I don't get some first time mums because I do. Um, there's usually a lot of fear from previous birth, and they think, oh, I had my baby got stuck maybe last time. I'm like, okay, but why did it get stuck? Were you on your back? Were you induced? I'm not saying that. Look, what I think women come to think is that their bodies have failed them, but the bodies haven't failed them. The system has failed them.
Yes.
Our bodies are actually designed to birth. Although there's a very famous obstetrician called Michel Audin, and he believes that if we don't sort this out, our bodies are going to evolve to lose the ability to birth naturally.
Right, and I can see how that would happen, because if you're not constantly doing what the body's designed to do, and you keep restricting, it's like breathing through your mouth. More people breathe through their mouth than they breathe through their nose, and as a consequence of that, there's skulls of 400 years ago and back in time from then when everyone's teeth was perfect.
Well, you interviewed Marina, didn't you? She spoke
Yes,
about that.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then because we've come into this modern world and we no longer chew in the way, and everything's processed and what have you, we're tending to breathe generally more through our mouths, which means our jaw is shrinking and the teeth get crooked and the body changes. So I can absolutely get that if continually we go down the route that nobody is actually doing natural births the way they used to do. But the argument, I suppose, the skeptic is that, children died, or women died giving birth in the past, left, right, and centre.
They still do.
And I'm sure they do. So, but that's not necessarily down to the birth, is it, or is it more to do with their circumstances? They're poor. They're malnutrition. What's the word I'm looking for?
Malnutrition. So there's three reasons that anyone would ever get ill. One is toxicity, one is deprivation, one is trauma, and that's on a level of mind, body, and soul. But if we look at childbirth in an isolated view, women did used to die all the time in childbirth because poverty was more rife. So for childbirth, one reason that you're going to have a terrible time, poverty. So if you're malnourished, you're living in an overcrowded environment where disease can spread like wildfire, you've got a terrible terrain in your immune system, that's a recipe for disaster. A genuine medical ailment, I don't know, you've been kicked by a donkey and you've broken your pelvis, that's going to cause a mechanical issue with birth.
I should think so.
The third reason, and the most common reason why birth goes wrong in 2023, is over-medicalization of birth. Interfering.
Really?
Yeah.
And when you say over medical, what, during the medical process or various other things they've been given during their lifetime?
Oh, well, a combination of all. But
a combination of all.
Specifically within the birth environment. So it's the domino effect. I'll give you a very, very common scenario. So scans are becoming like we have to rely on medical stuff to know if we're okay. It's just external validation. And again, separates women from their true nature. Because in 15 years, I've never seen a woman's intuition wrong, ever. But if they keep us in our heads, then we can keep relying on technology. And there's more money to be had in that, hey? But anyway, I won't go down that rabbit hole.
No, but I think you're absolutely, I mean, just on a broader spectrum, I think that's so very true, that we have been, that our natural intuition in so many different ways, that the governments, medical people, schools, all of them are taking the responsibility away from us to do the critical thinking that we would ordinarily do, or common sense, or knowing our bodies. And then they're trying to replace that with technology. I mean, look at Fitbits and things. You need a piece of kit to tell you whether you're fit. I mean, it is totally and utterly ridiculous. If you can't go for a run and go, I just feel exhausted, I've done my run. then, but oh no, I only done 2,000 steps, I've got to do another. It's like, we should know these things. It's inherent in us to know that. And I could absolutely understand that women would have known their body inside out, upside down, because they're not relying on all this nonsense that's trying to help them, unless it's in that very tiny little area where, as you say, the donkey's come up and kicked you, and the scan is necessary to say, actually, that pain you've got down there is a broken bone, or something else.
I can see how it's got to this point. I mean, I fell for it myself. I shouldn't have used those words. I was a product of that myself. I was told it's dangerous. Now, look, birth is not inherently dangerous. I can promise you that, but it's not inherently safe either. But neither is life. So I'm not here to go. I'm the polar opposite. I'm actually saying, well, what do you think? What do you feel? More to the point, what do you feel? So we get these scans, and then this is a very common call I get, or email. Hi, Nickita, I've been told I have a big baby and I have to be induced. I'm like, well, why are you having another scan at this stage of pregnancy? Why? Well, they're worried that the baby's big. So the first thing I tell them to ask the system is, will inductions shrink my baby? If you're worried about that. I mean, it's just a joke, but
yes.
But
it's a good point.
Yeah. And also, do babies outgrow their mums in nature? Is that normal? And if they're concerned about what's called a shoulder dystocia, so that's where the baby's shoulder gets stuck, which is very tricky sometimes. Although I have seen a couple of mums experience a shoulder dystocia at a home birth, but nothing needed to be done because her body told her what to do. They like lunge their leg forward and out pops the shoulder. I'm like, oh, the body does know what it's doing.
Right.
But anyway, I digress. So they'll say, yeah, you've got a big baby, so we're going to have to induce you now. But instead of women saying, okay, can you please show me the evidence that this big baby is going to harm me? I encourage women to ask questions like this. If you're concerned about a shoulder dystocia, what percentage of mothers who experience a shoulder dystocia in your trust were induced? And what percentage of women who experienced a dystocia were on their back in the lithotomy position? And can you show me evidence-based information that I personally will be subject to this shoulder dystocia? What percentage of induced babies end up in the neonatal intensive care unit? And why would you like to end my pregnancy prematurely? Because I always say to women, expect to be pregnant for 42 weeks. Expect it.
Yes.
But there's this obsession with, 40 weeks, the baby's got to come out. But it's, again, critical thinking. You're allowed to ask questions. I think women go through the system almost under the misapprehension that what they're being told is law, guidelines. And this might shock many of you. Guidelines that are only 8% evidence-based.
Really?
So
only 8%?
8% category A, I might stress. So there was a study done where they measure evidence based on category A, as in really good information and evidence, and E being crap. Only 8% was category A, evidence-based. And the Cochrane review said that maternity care is the worst evidence-based medicine there is. It's just awful.
So it might be, and I stress might be the case that if you're birthed in the back of a taxi on the way to the hospital, you've got a better birth than actually if you are in the hospital. I'm not saying that is the case, but I'm just saying it might be. But certainly, if you're at home. So tell me about the advantages at home then. If you've got common sense. I mean, I suppose one thing that people fear is that the baby will die if they don't do as they're told. Because that sort of thing. But if let's look at the home, the ideal environment then for women to have a birth in this country or in Great Britain these days, what would you say is the best scenario without being specifically it's got to be this or not or nothing?
The best scenario is where a woman feels empowered, and wherever that environment is, so be it. So if you feel very frightened of giving birth at home, definitely don't give birth there, because if you're frightened, you'll release adrenaline. And where there's fear, there's problems.
Right.
If you're frightened of hospital, don't go to hospital, give birth at home. In my experience, home birth, in fact, it's not just my experience, this is evidence-based, home birth is statistically safer. So fewer incidents of a cesarean section, fewer incidents of poor outcomes for maternal and the infant as well. But again, I don't really want to make this dogmatic and black and white. It's where the woman feels safe. And even when women just find out they're pregnant, they've only got 9 months, and they've usually been indoctrinated with so much fear, and they hear horror stories. Oh, love, just go for the C-section. Love, do this. I was split in half, and all these awful stories. And then you've got to undo years and years of fear indoctrination. But we don't need to climb up a mountain and look to the top and think how far we've got to go, just one step at a time. And continuity of care is so important, which is all but gone within the system. It hardly exists anymore. Just one point I want to make here, like when it comes to understanding just how bizarre the system has become. Vaginal exams in labour, they've become normal. Like, you can't come into the hospital until we've given you a vaginal exam to see where you are. That's like the world's worst bouncer standing there going, no, we've got to put our hand inside of you first. But think, why do we need a vaginal exam? You might say, well, to see how dilated the cervix is. And then what? So, because a woman's cervix can go from 4 centimeters to fully dilated in 6 hours, or it could take 10 minutes. So all that vaginal exam is doing is giving the care provider a glimpse in that moment in time only.
Right.
What it can do is cause a lot of trauma, especially for women who have been abused. It can actually make your cervix close back up, contrary to popular belief, because the body does exactly what the mind tells it. It's not safe. Stop giving birth. And of course it will. It can introduce infection, and it's unnecessary. And then not all midwives use this terminology. Some are very mindful and very kind, but you might hear the words, oh, you're only 3 centimeters. Well, where does that put a woman in her head in labour? I've failed already before I've even started. You need to know how dilated you are. I'm not saying don't have a vaginal exam. If you want a vaginal exam and if you think it will be helpful for you, then of course. But just please know this. You can decline.
Right. And that's the important thing is that, again, you should be in the driving seat all the time, not being told how your body is supposed to feel or where you should be at any one time. Only you know your body.
Mm-hmm.
And these are conversations that you'll have with your partner if your partner's around. If you need that support, you may be completely confident and go, it's fine, I've got this, I'm in control.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that to give birth in an optimal way, you need to be the epitome of a human being, not a human doing, not a human becoming. Just be, to surrender, to be in the present moment in a deep meditative state. You don't need to be in that neocortex all the time of recognizing, oh, what's that light mean now? What's that noise mean? Who's this person coming in talking to me and looking at my vagina? How's that conducive to a physiological normal birth? It's not. And I see the problem we have is this generational trauma. We have handmaidens. I teach, I have accredited courses where I teach birth keeping. So I have a 1-year course. It's called Artemis Birth Attendant Academy. And then I have a smaller 6-week birth companion and advocacy course. It used to be called the doula course, but it's now called that. And I show obstetric violence, major trigger warning. And you see this man standing in front of a woman with her legs open, putting his fingers inside, going, you've got to do this. I'm going to cut you now. And she's like, I don't want to be cut. We haven't even tried. And he goes, I'm the doctor. You listen to me. And she's got her mum and the nurses going, you listen to the doctor. We have this handmaiden. Listen to what the man is telling you to do. Don't listen to your body. The mum is saying no. And he cuts her 12 times in her perineum. This is going to cause generational trauma. Women will feel this. The body holds the score. If you're into Gabor Mate, watch as much as you can about understanding the root cause of trauma and how we can cut this and do things differently. C-sections, and I don't mean to upset anyone who's had a C-section. I'm not judging you at all. I'm just providing with information. When a baby is born by C-section, firstly, they're all born with wet lung. So they don't have a good squeeze through the birth canal. And they don't have the microbiome seeding that you do in a vaginal birth. So we are when we're born, our mouths are seeded with the microbiome, and obviously goes down into our gut and kickstart the immune system. Babies born by C-section are far more likely to have asthma, eczema, respiratory diseases, diabetes, obesity, and so it goes on. Now, if you do need a cesarean, you can actually wrap up like a gauze into a shape of a tampon, insert it into your vagina, and then when the baby's born, just rub the baby's mouth. So there are ways to get around it. Of course, breastfeeding will be optimal for the microbiome. But the point I'm trying to make is, if a little girl has been born via C-section, even if she grows up to have a vaginal birth herself, she can't pass on that seeding because she never had it in the first place. And there's a very good documentary. I urge everyone to watch it. It's on, I think it's on Amazon. It's called Microbirth, made by Tony Harmon, an incredible woman who knows everything there is to know about microbiome seeding and childbirth. But they're saying the reason we are so ill as a nation, or partly the reason we're so ill, is because our immune system is failing due to the way we're being born.
It sounds to me, knowing all the other stuff that on the journey that I've been going through, on how so much stuff is being pushed on us in a certain direction by certain think tanks and various dark forces, shall we say, and the fact that C-section seems to be very much on the increase and being the preferred use, that what you've just described, as far removed as you can from a natural birth that gives a baby and future generations the things that it needs, has been introduced into the system. And a lot of people are doing it, following the orders without any knowledge whatsoever of the potential damage that is not just happening to that, as you say, that baby, but the potential babies of that baby, once, assuming it's a girl, of course, has grown up and is giving all those nutrients to its own children, and the DNA and the microbiome, etc. It does sound like there is a mind of control behind all of this. This is sort of out of the remit, really, of this conversation, but it is interesting just what you said there. Observing how, again, another piece of the jigsaw puzzle seems to fit into a big controlling issue that we've had. Do you find that people, when they come to you, they're easily reassured by how you describe the process that you go through, or are they very much still in the mindset that they have been trained and brainwashed into thinking hospitals is the only answer?
Well, when push comes to shove, is the, for lack of a better word, awakened maternity organisation. So no, seldom do we have people come through that not willing to question anything. They're usually on this path already. They're on this journey. I think it's important to add, again, it's about choice. And I really don't mean to upset anyone or trigger anyone who's had a C-section. We only do what knowledge we have at the time. We're only as informed as the information we've got. So I don't mean to upset anyone at all. I've made mistakes with the birth choices I made, not willingly, but if we don't know that we have these options, and we can even ask to have a maternal-led C-section if you want one. So they bring the curtain down. You can pull your own baby out with guidance from the surgeon to have that beautiful experience. You can have a beautiful, calm C-section. And it's so important. I can't stress this enough. If there's one takeaway from this, please do not cut that cord, because a baby will lose a third of its blood supply if you cut that cord straight away. A third. You're going to lose billions of stem cells for that baby, for the baby's immune system. You must wait for white. When the cord has stopped pulsating, then you may cut it.
Wow.
They are cut straight away.
That is shocking.
And we wonder why we end up with so much illness within the first year of life, hospital admissions for children under 1. And also, let's talk about the mums for a second. Do you know the most common cause of death for a mum after birth? Suicide.
Postnatal depression?
Yeah. But women think, oh, it's just something that happens after you give birth. No, it's not. It's common, but it's not normal. What did they do to you in your birth? What did what did they take from you? You know, this is a rite of passage. This is a beautiful, natural process that women feel robbed of. And then they have to go away thinking, well, my body's failed me. But that's not true. 9 times out of 10, that is not true. And I'm not saying a body would fail you. If you are unwell, if there is a problem, if there is dis-ease within the body, yes, we should welcome medical intervention. You might want to ask your care provider this question. How much does the NHS get paid for an emergency C-section? They get paid nearly £4,000 by the Care Commissioners Group for every emergency set. Yeah.
And so when that's just normalised, is that still classed as an emergency?
No, that's an elective C-section.
Oh, right. Okay.
So they tell a very common reason for an elective, and the clue is in the word elective, is when women are told, again, this is just, it's so depressing. When they're told, oh, your baby's breech, so the baby's bum first or feet first, you can't have a vaginal birth. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. So these poor babies are being deprived of their microbiome seeding, their rite of passage of being born into a sea of oxytocin instead of cortisol and adrenaline. Breech is a variation of normal. Let me translate what they're actually saying is, we do not possess the skills to attend a physiological upright breech birth, so we're going to cut the baby out of you instead. Now, midwives are trained in breech birth, of course they are, but how often do they get to practice it? Because as soon as a baby is diagnosed breech, it goes from midwifery-led care to obstetric-led care, and then the women are usually C-sectioned. But this was based on a thing called the Hannah trial, where they found that breech babies were more likely to die from a vaginal birth, but then they had to retract that study because they realized it was the hands-on approach, laying down in lithotomy position, that was causing the problems. Now, for some unknown reason, a breech baby has a slightly higher increased risk of dying, whether it's vaginal or C-section, but we don't know why. But if you have a care provider that understands physiological upright breech birth, not laying down, not hands-on, then it's perfectly capable. And you should never confuse your body's ability with your practitioner's ability. They're two very, very different things. That's not to say if you find out you've got a breech baby, you go to the hospital and say, well, I'm going to have a vaginal birth. Who's attending you? Because if they don't know how to do it.
Well, quite.
Then you're not exactly in safe hands.
No.
You don't get research.
Absolutely. You don't get an acupuncturist to do a brain surgery, do you?
No.
So,
That's what I was saying. Going to an obstetrician for a natural birth is like going to a prostitute for a cuddle. It's pointless.
Right, exactly. One of the other things then, I mean, if more and more people are and have been trained wrongly to go to hospital or think that's the only way of doing it, or have been guided from going at home, if you go back, a couple of 100 years and you think mother and daughter would have had these conversations to a greater or lesser degree, as families were more connected and closer to one another. We weren't, our parents weren't one part of the country and we weren't a couple of 100 miles down the road, and all of that. People lived together more. So these sort of conversations, reassurance, the fear wouldn't have even approached, because the parents, and very often, of course, the mother would have attended to the daughter, or the aunt or the granny, or a member of the family would have done this.
There would have been a traditional birth attendant in the village.
Right.
So that's what I teach people to do. There'd be someone wise who understands childbirth. Mums would pass on their information to their children. And usually there'd be someone who, with a lot of wisdom, probably the natural medicine woman, will come and attend the births in an upright position. Like if you look at medieval midwifery, they used a birth stool. So the woman was upright, they sat on the stool, and the midwife would catch the baby underneath the stool. And they would keep the room warm. That's another thing. Oh God, I loathe when I hear women saying, "Oh, they put a hat on my baby straight away." I'm like, "Oh no, that you're blocking that smell. The mum needs to smell the baby, and the baby needs to smell the mum to pass the placenta, because you need to have more oxytocin to get the contractions going to pass the placenta. You stick a hat on that baby, and that's a barrier. Your body temperature is more than capable of keeping your baby at the correct heat. However, if you're in a sterile environment and they've put the baby in a separate container from their mum, you separate the baby, yes, you might have some temperature issues with the baby. But mum on baby's chest, there's something known, this is amazing. This is called the fetal ejection reflex. So mums who have got the baby in a very good position, they're listening to their body, they don't need to sit there and go, oh, push, push, push. The baby just comes out. It's called the fetal ejection reflex. Then hopefully mum is the first person to touch her baby, puts baby on her tummy, and the baby will do a birth crawl. They will naturally crawl at newborn. So their little feet or their knees will push down onto the fundus to start more contractions for the placenta to be born. And then they will start rooting for the breast to start breastfeeding. And then again, that breastfeeding reflex will trigger more oxytocin to bring the placenta out. Nature works beautifully. Let's try not to interrupt it.
That is, I mean, it is. What you've just said there, you've summed it up, and I often wonder why we continually interfere with something that works and has worked for hundreds of thousands of years, and yet we in the last 150 years in birthing, and possibly a bit longer with the sort of people, richer people who could afford doctors and things, we all just think that we're more sophisticated and clever, cultivated, and all this sort of nonsense. So we've got shiny, sterile bits of equipment that we can go in and pull things out, and that we're ever so clever. And yet we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the fact that we trusted our bodies, we trusted our loved ones, and we just got down and did it.
Well, at no point during your pregnancy do you go, oh no, how do I grow the baby's kidneys? Your body just does it. If you were in a coma, your head doesn't need any input within. It would just give birth. That's what happens. We are built to do this. But because we are living in a society of so much cognitive dissonance where we are separated from our true nature, probably by design, let's get you talking about this over here and you talking about that over there, and then you can argue amongst yourselves and ha ha ha. But of course, no, you should go to hospital. You're stupid. You're dangerous giving birth at home. That's so irresponsible. And you've got fear, and more fear. If we can just cut that noise and go within and listen, our bodies don't lie to us.
Yeah. It's such a powerful message. I mean, you're telling people effectively, you take back responsibility. You've got the innate ability to do it.
Yeah.
And trust yourself.
The best compass is our inner compass. And again, I think we are in a society which are obsessed with black and white outcomes. I'm not here to say have a home birth and everything will be brilliant, or have a hospital birth and you will avoid danger. Listen to yourself. Now, I'm not saying you should, because if you don't want to take responsibility for your birth, and I totally understand why you wouldn't, we have a system and you can hand that over. They will take it. But if you don't want to do that, we can help you. So when push comes to shove, is now in 10 countries. So we've got over 120 natural birth practitioners. If you want to come for drugs and episiotomies, we're not doing that. So we're not governed by the NMC or anything. We don't do anything clinical. We do holistic practice. So we teach homeopathy, preventative measures. I teach everyone about the brewer's diet. So you might find this interesting, Richard. So many women will go through their pregnancy worried about things like preeclampsia. Have you heard of preeclampsia?
No.
So it's a common ailment in pregnancy where your blood pressure gets very high and it's a big emergency and the baby has to be born. So many people go through the system thinking, well, it's Russian roulette, whether I get it or not, and we don't know why it happens. When you're pregnant, you have to expand your blood volume by up to 60%. In order to do that, your liver needs to perform 500 metabolic functions. In order to do that, you need at least 100 grams of protein a day. Now, women make the mistake of trying to lower their salt intake or don't gain too much weight. And what happens is, if your blood volume is not expanding, you can have a multitude of problems. So you have a pool of blood behind the placenta, and that pool of blood needs to function by your liver and the protein you're eating. If it doesn't, you can end up with placental abruption, where the placenta comes away from the uterine wall too early. Then if our blood volume is not expanding, our body mistakes it for a hemorrhage, so it starts to hold water. What happens when you start to hold water? You get high blood pressure, and then you get preeclampsia. This can all be prevented with understanding nutrition. So every woman who is pregnant, they need to look at the brewer's diet.
So what is the brewer's diet?
Loads of protein.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 6 pints of beer before you give birth.
Loads and loads of protein. So it was by Dr. Tom Brewer. He understood the correlation between blood volume expansion and preventing ailments during pregnancy. So it's really important to understand the Brewer's diet.
And protein could meat and things like this.
Meat, yes.
And I'm just thinking, back in the day, if the woman is about to give pregnant and people are rallying around, they're going to sort of give us food and things like that to comfort her, to keep her at ease, to occupy her as well. And, she'd be gnawing on the bone, gobbling all that lovely protein.
Protein's fantastic. They'll say, if you go through the system, don't eat liver when you're pregnant, but liver's fantastic. I mean,
organic. Make sure it's clean, organic meat. That's the other thing. None of this sort of highly processed stuff with all sorts of chemicals in it.
Yeah, and unless you're eating liver from a polar bear, it's unlikely you're going to get a vitamin A overdose. But a little bit, you can have a little bit. I feel very confident taking liver during pregnancy. It's full of everything you need, but the brewer's diet is so important. There are other ways to help with bleeding after birth. For example, I use shepherd's purse tincture, cinnamon bark tincture, angelica essential oil.
Sorry, say that a bit slower. You went very quick, and I thought you said shepherd's pie, but you said shepherd's what?
Shepherd's purse tincture.
Shepherd's purse tincture.
It's really good to have around the house for nosebleeds and stuff. Soldiers used to use it in the First World War to stop bleeding.
And you buy that ready-made?
Yeah. There's a great Instagram page, Herbs of Life. They make them. So you can take these tinctures after the placentas come out. You mustn't take it before because you don't want your uterus to contract down before the placentas come out.
Right.
So after the placenta's born, you can take like 4 dropperfuls of shepherd's purse, 4 of cinnamon bark. That can help to prevent bleeding. And then nature's closest version to a blood transfusion is a litre jug of dark grape juice and then crack an organic raw egg, because 99% of our blood components are mimicked in dark grape juice, and the 1% that isn't is in a raw egg.
Wow.
So that can really help. So I get women to take that if they're anemic before they're giving birth. So you take half of it one day, have a day off, and then half of it the following day, and it can help anemia miraculously. It's very, very good for that. Another thing women should know about, so I get a lot of phone calls that are saying, I'm really scared just in case I need a blood transfusion because I don't want contaminated blood. I don't really need to expand on that. They're not giving their options. So if you're having a cesarean section, ask for a cell salvage machine.
A what? A cell salvage?
Cell salvage, yeah. So that's another option if you don't want blood. Another option is gelifusing, which is a plasma expander. You can use that instead of, just ask them what they give the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Good point.
Yes. You can join a company called My Medical Choice. And you can use a discount code, actually, Nickita. I think it's Nikki, actually, Nikki86. I think they've done it. But yeah, My Medical Choice, you can get a bracelet to show that you're not accepting blood products. And then the website will tell you what the alternatives are, help them with the blood side of things on there. But again, this is more things that women don't know about because they're not informed about it. Why would you know there's an alternative to a blood transfusion? Why would that come in?
Well, they're not going to tell you, are they?
Not volunteer it.
No.
But if you need help navigating the system, please call me. I'm happy to take phone calls. If you go to my website, whenpushcomestosshove.co.uk, there's a helpline number and an email. The other thing I wanted to mention as well, we don't just provide natural birth practitioners to the rich, to the middle class. That's not what we're all about. We want every single woman worldwide to be able to access this sort of care. So I have created something, and hopefully Rich would be so kind to put this in your YouTube description. It's called the Beverley Beech Project. Now, Beverley Beech was my mentor, and she passed away in February. I want to raise money so that I can provide low-income families with the care they want. We do have a little access fund pot at the moment, but it's down to next to nothing. I'm trying to get grants and funding. So that means if someone is on a low income and they can't afford the price of a traditional birth keeper, it's usually around the £2,000 mark, then we will provide them with care for free, and then we will pay the birth keepers out of the access fund pot. Because it's so important. It shouldn't just be for one group of women. It should be for everyone. So we're trying desperately. If anyone watching knows anyone who could help with funding to get grants for this sort of thing, please get in contact, because we really need help. Because I'm so passionate that peace on earth begins at birth. I really believe that. And if we can give women and babies a good start in life, where they're born into a sea of oxytocin, and women of earth start taking back their births, and we have some hope. But how we come into the world, it really does matter. And women should be empowered. And there's a ripple effect. If a woman's had a terrible birth and the depression sinks in, it will ripple on to the husband, to the partners, to other children. And then we end up with generational trauma. But we can cut this. And we can do something. And come and join the movement. We've got tons of free information. I have a YouTube channel, When Push Comes to Shove. I'm on Instagram, when push comes to shove. I'm on Telegram, Awakened Pregnancy and Birth. There's tons of free info, but if you really want to have a deep dive, or you're a birth nerd and you want to learn more, we've got courses how to navigate the system as a parent. We've got courses for parents who are expecting. And if you want to do what I do, we have training courses. So come get involved. It's not just about women who are pregnant. This affects everyone.
Nickita, that's absolutely amazing what you've been saying to me and to the audience, and I really can't thank you enough. Can you send me an email with all those links so I can put all of that in the description, because there will be people, of course, and people can, obviously, they can pass it on to their friends and family and people who know others that are in a similar situation or may need some help or just some advice, or can offer, as you say, get involved with. Did you say it was Beverley Beech?
Yeah, So Beverley wrote a book called Am I Allowed? That is a book every woman should have while they're pregnant, and all the proceeds of Am I Allowed will go to the Beverley Beech Project. Before she died, she entrusted me with her book, so I'm writing edition 5, which I've got major imposter syndrome about, because she taught me everything I know, but I'm happy to do it. But the Beverley Beech Project, it's on the website.
Brilliant.
Yeah, have a look. But we're trying our best to get as much money as possible so we can help as many women as possible.
You've certainly opened up my eyes. I'm very thrilled that we've done a number of good things for my kids all those years ago, before the troubles of the day, and now I think it's so much more important that children who are being attacked and targeted by various different outfits, shall we say, that we give them the best future possible, and also, as you say, the mums who are doing the hard work here at the coalface, if I can put it like that. Nickita, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing all that information. It's been really, really interesting, and I know people will have got a lot out of it. So do check out the websites and all the other links. It'll be there in the description. In the meantime, I'll be back with more monologues and other interviews, but that's really interesting, especially from a man's perspective. Absolutely fascinating. And I would just add that I think every man ought to know all of this as well, because you're supporting your woman every way. And if you can, just
we have a daddy course.
You have a daddy course. There you go.
Of course, yeah. Get in contact if you're interested, because if especially if your wife or your girlfriend wants to free birth and they don't want the NHS involved,
yes,
you've got to understand birth. Men are fixers, but birth doesn't need fixing. Just allow it to happen. But just become empowered and support your wife, and yeah.
Brilliant.
Go on.
Absolutely brilliant. There you go. Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'll be back. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, everybody. Till next time. Goodbye.